Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Whole Tooth, a podcast all about sharks, rays and their underwater habitat, brought to you by the Save Our Seas Foundation. And this week I am very excited because we are answering all your questions about, drumroll please, the basking shark, a species that is not only the second largest species of shark in the world, but is also one that is very close to my heart. And I am joined this week by two other basking enthusiasts, Shane Wasik and Rachel Brooks, who run Basking Shark Scotland, an organisation dedicated to raising awareness and promoting the conservation of these incredible animals on the west coast of Scotland, which is where I live. This is a really fun episode that I actually got to record in person at Basking Shark HQ. So grab yourself a coffee and let's dive into the mysterious and murky world of the basking shark. Today is a particularly fun episode because I am actually recording it in person in Basking Shark headquarters with Shane and Rachel from Basking Shark Scotland, because we are talking about, you guessed it, the basking shark. Shane and Rachel, hello and welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Welcome to Basking Shark HQ.
Now, as you can probably tell, full disclosure, we haven't just met, we do know each other pretty well. So we've known each other for a couple of years now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I am a seasonal guide for Basking Shark Scotland, but Shane and Rachel are the brains behind the operation. So Shane, can you tell us what your role is and what Basking Shark Scotland does?
We obviously do snorkeling and wildlife venture tours in the Hebrides, based from Oban and then out to the Isle of Coll in the summertime. We take a variety of people into various islands and various experiences, which can range from snorkeling in kelp forests and with seals to into Fingal's Cave and with basking sharks and watching whales and dolphins and lots of exciting things like that. And I just do all the rubbish jobs since I'm the owner, so I get to do all the lovely stuff where everyone has a good time. So yeah, I get to stay in the boat. But yeah, I usually I drive the boat now and obviously do all the admin and things in the back office in the winter time. But yeah, you generally find me doing all the stuff that other people don't want to do.
Yeah, but driving boats is fun.
Yeah, it is. On the nice poor days where it's raining, it's nice to be in the cabin. But then when it's nice and sunny and everyone's outside having a nice time, then maybe not so good.
I mean, a lot of people don't actually know that basking sharks are on the west coast of Scotland. I mean, when we talk about, we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail later on, but when we talk about global hotspots for sharks, not many people associate that with Scotland. And I guess we do quite a lot of, when we are out on the boats, we do quite a lot of kind of data collection as well, really, or we try to.
Well, that's it, yeah. So, and at that time, obviously, like you guys, background in zoology and marine biology, and, I've been involved in lots of different projects over the years, but wanted to have a kind of science element to it as well, because obviously we've got such a great opportunity to be in the environment with really cool species and being out there every single day, over a researcher who only has a certain amount of time that they can be in the field. We're literally there every single day and see pretty much everything there is to see with them, so we've got such a unique opportunity to capture some really interesting data. So that was a big thing to do that as part of it, and not just be cutting about having a good time, which is also good, but you want to have a good time with a purpose.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And for us, it doesn't kind of really feel like a job sometimes, unless you're washing someone's minging wetsuit at the end of the day.
Yeah, the yin and yang. Take the rough with the smooth.
And Rachel, how about you? Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing before you started with Basking Shark Scotland, and then B, kind of what your role is with the company now?
Yep. So I've been working with Basking Shark Scotland now for the last 2 years as operations manager. So as our job here is quite seasonal, during the summer it's all very much all systems go, out on the boats every day, having most of the time a really good time, looking for wildlife. And then during the winter there's a lot of work behind the scenes, making sure that everything is ready for the next year. So we do a lot of admin and a lot of office work over winter when it's not quite as enjoyable to be in the West Highlands. But before that, I was living overseas. So I've been working in the dive industry now since 2015. When I became a dive instructor after leaving uni. And I spent that time travelling around teaching diving, basically mostly in the tropics, so opposite climate to here, guiding tours with mantas and whale sharks as well in the Ningaloo, before we decided to come back home and set up roots here in Scotland.
Awesome. But I mean, I know like all about like your background and your history, and like all the experiences that you've had just look so incredible, if like in much warmer waters than this, but as we're going to talk about, equally as amazing and biodiverse.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I've been blown away by the wildlife here in the Hebrides. It's really, exceeded my expectations for sure.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
But I mean, my role is very different to these guys. I just hop on for the fun bit in summer and help take people out with the Basking Shark, so I don't have to deal with the kind of typhoon of emails that come in over autumn and winter. But my next question is a question that we ask every single guest on this podcast, and it's one that everybody says they have problems in answering because it's quite difficult when you ask a lot of marine experts what their most memorable experience in the ocean is. But I'm going to pitch it to you guys. So Rachel, what is your most memorable experience in the ocean?
Yeah, so that is a really tough question, and I've been really fortunate at the experiences I've had over the last 7 years. But it would definitely be one here actually, which I guess might be a similar one for both of you, was a really standout day for me. It was the start of last season when we first arrived in Col. Some of the locals had said that they'd seen some really big whales off the coast. They said they thought they were minkies, but from the description they sounded like something way bigger. So they said they could see them blasting fish into the air, and huge white pectoral fins, and humpbacks are my absolute all-time favourite animal. So straight away I was like, there's humpbacks about. I think it took us about 3 weeks before we eventually caught up with them. But yeah, we've dubbed it Barney Day. It was just a mind-blowing day. It was off an episode of Blue Planet. We had superpods of common dolphins, 2 humpback whales feeding for 5 or 6 hours, just lunging next to the boat. There was birds everywhere. There's even a couple of basking sharks in the mix. It was just insane, I think. And being here on home water just makes it so much more special. So.
Yeah, because we don't get humpbacks that often here. We do get them.
Yeah.
But
it was mind-blowing.
Especially to have an experience like that where we were with them for, I think was it 6 hours?
Something like that, just most of the day, mid-morning till like 5 o'clock or something, wasn't it?
It was absolutely insane.
And we could have stayed longer as well, but we just get to that time, it was like, it's going to take us an hour to get back.
But honestly, like I mean, no one's ever asked me on this podcast, but that is my most memorable experience as well, just because.
You should say what your one is then.
That one.
Oh, you can't have the same one, because if I'm not allowed that one, you're not allowed that one.
Well, we were talking about it now, but yeah, it was just for me
collective one.
A collective most memorable experience.
I think it was really nice as well, being with such a great group of people and just being able to sit on the boat with the engines off, just enjoying it for just such a long time as well.
Yeah.
It's not often when you're in like a working environment that you can just take something in like that. And we should also say it's nicknamed Barney Day because the humpback whale was called Barney, as
not the dinosaur,
as it was sighted over on the East Coast later in the year, and some school children named it Barney because of the barnacles on its tail.
Oh, I didn't know that's why they called it Barney. That's actually like that's actually really sweet. Yeah, it was mad. But Shane, you are allowed to say that as your most memorable experience as well.
I'm not going to say that one because you've ruined it.
What are you going to say?
Well, since it's Basking Shark Scotland, I have to say a basking shark, don't I?
But yeah, go on then. What's your most memorable experience?
Probably one of the days we had when we just had like a mega shark day. I think counted over like 100, and it was the only day I've ever done basking shark swimming anchored, because we had that many. We were just in a bay, and there was just that many, and we just didn't need to move, so we just dropped anchor, and they were just similar to Barney, I guess, that we were just there for hours, and it was just mega flat and just sharks everywhere, and it was just ridiculous. So that was probably one of the most memorable.
Moving on to the star of our show today, which is the basking shark. We've got quite a lot of audience questions to get through today, because whenever you mention the basking shark, a lot of people are really interested to find out more about them. But I thought we could start in the easiest place, which is by describing what a basking shark actually is. So Shane, do you want to start us off on this one?
What is a basking shark?
What is a basking shark? Don't say a shark.
It's a shark. A large macro shark. I guess it looks kind of similar to a great white with its mouth closed. But when it feeds, it opens up its huge mouth, can be over a metre wide, and they have these modified appendages in their mouth called a gill raker, and that's how they filter out these little microscopic animals from the water column. So they have a huge big mouth that they open up. So they're a really unique shark, one of only 3 filter feeders, but very different to the other 2, which is whale shark and the mega mouth, but very unique looking animal, and it's really cool that we've got a big hotspot for them in our kind of home turf.
You mentioned there that they're a mackerel shark, which I thought was one of the most interesting things about them, is that they're from the order Lamniformes, which is the mackerel sharks, and that includes things like the white shark, which means that their body shape is actually incredibly similar. So very, very different to a whale shark, which is a bit more flat.
Yeah.
And when the basking shark's got its mouth closed, it can look like a massive great white shark coming towards you, which I think is really cool. But they can get massive. So Rachel, how big can the basking shark actually get?
Yeah, so they are the largest fish that we get in the UK and the second largest in the world, growing up to 12 metres, with the largest confirmed record being 12.2. So yeah, they're absolutely ginormous. And the ones we get here, normally we'd say a very large shark would be maybe 8 to 10 metres, as we don't quite see as many of those really large individuals anymore, unfortunately. And yeah, they weigh over 5 tons, so they're really, really big fish.
Yeah. They can be absolutely massive. That's like, I mean, what is that in feet, if you transfer that to feet?
About
35 feet maybe.
Yeah, and I just find it so mind-boggling that 2 of the largest species of shark in the world, they're not predators at all. They're actually filter feeders, and they've evolved those mechanisms differently. We actually we mentioned this very briefly on an earlier episode of the podcast with Megan, Jada and Omani, and we were talking about the difference between basking sharks and whale sharks, and they made a really interesting observation, which I personally agree with, is that the whale shark is kind of like the basking shark 2.0 kind of thing. So it's got like, they do the same thing, but the basking shark is a bit slower and a bit groggier in the way that it does it.
An outdated version.
Yeah. So basking sharks, can you explain like the differences between a basking shark and a whale shark?
Yeah, so when we're talking about plankton eating sharks, the basking shark is the only one that exclusively feeds passively, which in more simple terms means it's extra lazy, really. It's not sucking the water in like the whale shark does and the megamouth shark. It actually just has to swim open mouth through the water, straining the water through its gill rakers. So yeah, if you're talking about it being an outdated version, it does seem to be a really simple feeding mechanism compared to other sharks where it have highly developed predatory hunting techniques.
But yeah, basking sharks, I think I love them even more than the whale shark, just because of that reason, is that they're just kind of a bit gnarlier and a bit...
Yeah, they are just that rugged looking cousin that's not quite as
A
glamorous.
lot of people say they're like prehistoric looking or dinosaur like, and just that skin and all the cuts and grooves and mottling and things. They just look very different, don't they?
Yeah, but then you get the megamouth shark, which is that third species of filter feeder, and that looks like the version before the Basking shark. Going back to the Basking shark, where can we find them?
We can find them. You can actually find them all over the world, funnily enough. But there is a variety of hotspots around the place. Here is one of them, of course, but the ones in the northeast Atlantic migrate to and from the temperate seas in the summertime. So generally between the west coast of the UK and Ireland in the summer, and then they head down to the subtropics in the winter. But there are still remaining populations in other oceans, so northwest or northeast Pacific, and then down towards like New Zealand and things. So and there's been records in Australia and Indonesia and South Africa and all over the place. So they are a very global species, but very specific hotspots where you have a reasonable chance of actually seeing them. So obviously here is one of the best ones.
Yeah, Rachel, what's the general rule of thumb for kind of seeing them on the west coast? At kind of what time of year do we tend to see them?
Yeah, so we normally start to hear about sightings around late spring, and that can be a few odd sightings out in the isles around here, and more commonly around on the south coast of the UK. And it's mostly in July and August when we start seeing them on the surface in really large numbers. So we've mentioned already that the water here is quite cold, but the conditions just start to match up through the spring with really nutrient-rich waters, with big phytoplankton blooms in turn making big zooplankton blooms. And that then brings in these sharks in really large numbers, and we see them at the surface because they're at the surface feeding. And as you've already said, that's not a very large portion of their time, but that's their time that we are specifically looking for.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the migrations that they undertake, or kind of like what we know about them?
So there doesn't really seem to be much of a uniform answer for where basking sharks go, which is quite a consistent theme across what we know about basking sharks. But yeah, so we know that they come here in the summer in really large numbers, and we see them off the coast of Ireland as well. But historically, you'd have had large aggregations in other places where they've unfortunately been almost wiped out. So the sharks that we have here, it does seem that some of them might stay here over winter. We have had sighting reports of them through the winter, and they've been seen by divers during winter in deep water as well. Some of them have been tagged doing huge transatlantic migrations. So that was one tagged off the Isle of Man, and it went all the way over to Canada over 82 days, and that was almost 10,000 kilometres. So originally they thought the sharks were maybe following continental shelves, but they've also seen now that they're just swimming in open water for really large distances. So there is definitely a little bit more going on in the basking shark brain than we give them credit for. And there's also other ones going down to the Bay of Biscay. So again, they're going all over the show, really. As we've already said, they have a global population, and that you can see them in most parts of the world. But yeah, we don't really know much about their population numbers or where they're going or what they're doing in that time. There's still so much to learn about them. Yeah,
definitely. Like that's going to be a common theme throughout this episode, because we are sort of getting out of the sort of territory of what we do know about basking sharks, and as the episode's going to carry on, we're going to find out just how much we actually don't know about them. Speaking of, they obviously migrate huge distances, and they've got to obviously eat something to keep themselves going. So this brings us on to the kind of, this is the area that most people wanted to know about, bar the kind of threat to the basking shark, which is what they feed on and how they do it. So let's start with what basking sharks actually eat.
So they are planktivorous, meaning they feed on zooplankton. So when we're talking about zooplankton, that's all those tiny little organisms floating through the water column. We got fish and decapod larvae, tiny crustaceans. They do have a very targeted preference here for calanoid copepods, and we know that they do favour areas in which they find more of those from analysing their stomach contents and plankton samples. As we've said already, when they're feeding exclusively passively, so it's called obligate ram filter feeding.
Ooh.
And they're the only sharks that do that, which makes them really special.
Obligate ram.
Yeah, so it's basically just talking about when you see those pictures of the basking sharks with their big open mouths, which are about a metre wide, they're swimming through the water and sieving out all the plankton, basically. Mm-hmm. So...
sieving for a living.
got a sieve to survive.
Hashtag.
Why is that not on a t-shirt?
Yeah, sieve to survive.
Sieving for a living. I like
Yeah.
Right, it's your new Christmas t-shirt campaign.
See that coming out soon. Get your t-shirts.
So they feed on calanoid copepods, like I said, and something that Basking Shark Scotland have done a bit of is the plankton sampling to see kind of exactly what species it is. And can you talk a little bit about that, Shane?
Yeah. Well, we haven't done too much on species level. It's well known that they eat two types of, mainly the calanoid copepods, but there's two different species, Calanus finmarchicus and Calanus helgolanticus. So we've not done too much about that because there's been a lot of studies based on that, and quite interestingly about those two species and their effect on them for sea temperature and moving their distribution, which is quite interesting. We can go on to that later on. What we've looked at is more about kind of abundance levels and where they're feeding and where they're not feeding, which was kind of interesting, or very interesting. So we found that areas where the basking sharks are feeding are areas of higher abundance, which you would assume, so i.e. there's more plankton there, so they're going to feed more in that area, but it was actually more that they would feed on the larger adult stages of the copepods, so they were basically getting more bang for their buck. So you can imagine it, a basking shark is a very energy efficient animal, and they're getting a very small meal for their efforts swimming along, so they want to get as much food in as possible, so they'll actively find areas where there's more copepods but also larger ones, so they're getting
that makes sense
more at that time.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're I love the basking sharks feeding strategy, because if I could choose a feeding strategy, that would be the one that I would choose, is just walking around with your mouth wide open and shoving as much in as you possibly can. And if you're going to do that, you're probably going to go for the bigger, I don't know how
that's it, yeah.
relate it, jelly beans, maybe. Go for the bigger,
yeah, you
bigger
don't
jelly
want
beans.
one sitting in a wee bowl, you go for the big giant one that's at the end of the table.
Why not? Yeah. But let's talk a little bit about, we've mentioned a few of the things so far, but maybe we can go into a little bit more detail about the actual sieve, if you like, the filter feeder mechanism, which is what everybody associates with the basking shark, which are the gill rakers. So who wants to take this?
Yeah, a gill raker. You could think. I mean, a lot of people, if you mentioned a whale's baleen, they would probably know what you were able to imagine what that looks like. A large hair-like appendage. So you can imagine a filter feeding whale, as they got these big brushes or hairs that they close their mouth, and then the water is sieved out and they retain the fish in their mouth. So it's kind of similar-ish for basking sharks, that they have this type of apparatus in their mouth, but what they also have on it is mucus. So when they open their mouth, the gill arches on the side of its head flare open, and the water is able to pass over these gill rakers, or this hair-like structure. So the water passes through over the gills, so they get their oxygenation from there, but then that passes over the gill raker, and that appendage then filters out all the zooplankton that we've talked about, which is trapped, I think, both by the physical hair-like structure, but also on this mucus. So these copepods all get trapped onto that apparatus, and what happens is the shark then closes its mouth once it gets the kind of cue that it's got a lot of plankton in there, and then it kind of makes this mucousy soup and then swallows it down. And it's quite interesting because a lot of people, one of the random questions that we got asked often on the boat is, am I going to get swallowed by a basking shark? Because obviously they see this huge mouth, and I guess you would kind of think that if you were a little bit you didn't know much about them, but actually their throat is actually very tiny, so they've got this huge mouth to capitalize on trying to get in as much food into that area as possible, but then when they're swallowing it down, it is just this tiny little plankton soup that they create with this mucus, so it's actually very tiny.
Yeah, and you'd also have to try pretty hard to get inside a shark's mouth, because like we see quite a lot of them under the water and see what their behaviour is like, and if you stay nice and still, they do come really close to you. But it looks as if they're going to swallow you whole, and then just at the last minute it either turns to the side or goes underneath. And I guess, but they do have the electroreceptors that a lot of other sharks do. We believe they have a fairly good sense of smell, so they should be able to detect where you are in the water, and that basking shark's not going to want you in its mouth, so you'd actually probably have to swim into its mouth and curl up inside it, and even then it wouldn't even swallow you. So
imagine you dressed up as a giant copepod. Maybe it'd be like, never mind these really rubbish small ones, I'm going to go for that giant one.
Yeah, but it couldn't swallow you. That would be really disappointing.
It would suck in it like a giant gobstopper, maybe.
What a vision.
Oh, maybe. But this is quite a nice place to answer. We've got 2 audience questions about food, and the first one comes from Aileen, I hope I'm saying your name right, on Twitter, and she asks, how do basking sharks get enough food? Because they are obviously these enormous animals, and they're feeding on a species that's about 1 to 2 millimeters in size. So how do they get enough food to sort of keep themselves going? And they've got a few tactics, right?
Being as large as they are, they need to eat a really huge number of tiny copepods to have enough energy to survive. So when we're thinking about them swimming and with their big mouths open, if you're swimming through the water with something so wide, it obviously creates a lot of drag. So they have to really optimize where they're feeding to make that worthwhile. So as we've said already, they'll target specific areas where there's a higher abundance of their preferred prey type, and even there they're looking for the biggest ones of their preferred prey. So they do have a really developed sense of smell, and you've mentioned already that they can sense electrical fields with their ampullae of Lorenzini around their nose, those little dots you can see when you look at them close up, and that's always detecting electrical impulses in a closer range. So they're pretty much always moving to find the densest plankton abundance, basically. So when you look at them on the surface, they look super erratic. They're always going side to side, and they're just really unpredictable to swim with. The second thing that makes swimming with basking sharks a little bit trickier is that they'll normally be swimming in tide lines and tidal fronts, so where the plankton will be accumulating in one place, and when you're almost 10 metres long and have a huge fin, it's quite easy to drift up and down tide lines. When you're just a person with a pair of fins, it's not quite as easy. And yeah, they look like they're moving really slowly, but they're actually quite impressive when they move through the water like that.
Because they said about some of the papers that have looked into the feeding strategies, they said they consume about sort of 30-40 kilos of plankton a day is what they are kind of getting up to. But it still doesn't seem very much for the size of an animal. But they have to feed constantly just to maintain their energy requirements. So quite interesting. And one of the other things that you probably didn't touch on is their liver as well, which is a huge energy source can be up to a quarter or a third of their body weight. So potentially, we talked about these migrations, and then they're moving back and forward. They do come to the temperate seas in the summertime, where we have this abundance of zooplankton, and they're obviously feeding a lot of the time during that period. What I don't think they know that much about is how much they're feeding during the winter time. They do go to deep water, whether they're actually feeding on different types of zooplankton or different species at that time, or whether it's a summer feeding bonanza and they put on all the weight and get all this energy into the liver, and that's used as a store for the winter time. We're not really sure, but quite interesting.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to know what they're actually, or how they're keeping themselves going over winter if they're not feeding. Because there was that, I think it was it by Sims, that one paper that suggested that they might still be feeding in deep water.
Yeah.
I think there was an account of them feeding at about 800 to 900 metres on plankton still.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because plankton, you can find plankton at those depths.
you
so
kind of think about it very much being a surface level thing, but they'll follow it up and down the water column throughout the day.
Yeah, but again, we don't know. We don't know that side of their life is like shrouded in mystery. We also have another really interesting question actually, which is from Izzy on Instagram, and she says, do they ever choke on big things? Which I can kind of...
Like a giant plankton gobstopper.
Yeah, maybe. Or I can see her line of thought. So say for example they might swallow a jellyfish by accident because they're not kind of picking it out of the water. They're not being particularly fussy about what they're taking out of the water, basically. So
yeah, it's interesting, eh?
Yeah,
I've got a good video on that where you see a shark swimming along, and then you can obviously see we get these species of jellyfish called lion's manes, which can be really big, very, very large, but like even up to a metre wide. Generally not as big as that we see them. You'd probably say about a really big dinner plate, 30-40 centimetres across. But you can see in the video this lion's mane, and the shark swimming towards it, feeding in the same area because the jellyfish feed on the same copepods what the sharks do. But as you were saying before, the shark coming along and just at the last minute just turns its head slightly and just avoids it, which is really cool to see that. It's quite subtle. You have to watch it a few times in the video just to see the movement, because obviously they wouldn't want a jellyfish or anything else to go into their mouth. I'm sure it's fairly obviously it's not going to be that robust to have lots of debris in there. But I think there's been some papers talked about the kind of vortex of them swimming through and the flow of water, how it goes in and out, and whether actually if they were to swim into a jellyfish, whether it would actually go into the mouth, or whether them moving along through the water column is pushing water as well and it kind of moves out to the side, whereas the plankton are just stay within that and goes through the gill rakers kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question to think about because I suppose I get asked this on the boat as well because people are asking about plastics and wondering if bits of plastics or marine debris could get choked. But like you said, you do see them sometimes like give a little, it almost looks like a little cough. And I do wonder if that's what kind of that serves a function as getting rid of anything that's got stuck.
It must do at some point, you would think. There must be some kind of mechanism for it.
Yeah, you must do. But yeah, really interesting question, Izzy. So, moving on to a big grey area, pun not intended, in the basking shark's life, which is kind of their mating and reproductive behaviours. So, we really don't know that much about basking shark mating. We're starting to see a lot more information come out from stuff from this year, for example, but what do we know really about mating behaviours or any theories?
Yeah, well, it's been long talked about in these parts just because we see behaviours that are not conducive to being normal basking shark stuff, i.e. feeding and things like that. So this close following, so them all following each other very closely. We see breaching, so they jump out of the water. We see changing in colours when they're in a kind of group in the water. And as time has gone on, and we've not us but universities and researchers have put tags on it. They've had camera tags that's shown this kind of group behaviour where they're all kind of getting together. So there's lots of things that point to it being a mating time. It's just that it's never been captured on camera. There has been people that have said that they've seen it before on the surface, and certainly we've seen something that was similar to that, but it wasn't like, you were able. I'm sure people have seen sharks mating and how it goes on underwater. You can't really see that on the surface with a basking shark, 10 metre long sharks. It's not that. It would be pretty obvious that was what was happening, but it's likely to be happening underwater. But all these behaviours that we see kind of point to that happening, including all the mating scars that we see on the bodies where they're obviously biting onto each other. So most people agree that it's probably happening because of all these indicators that are pointing to it. It's just not been captured on camera yet to say definitively, yes, that's what's happening. It is likely to, but
something you mentioned that I kind of wanted to talk about is breaching. Rachel, do you know kind of like why it is that they breach? Because there's a couple of different ideas of why they might do it.
Yeah, so again, we don't have a definitive answer of why they breach.
Podcast.
There's a couple of theories. Mostly with breaching in sharks and whales, it's more of a social cue normally, and they think that could also be similar for the basking sharks. And when we see them here in the summer, that's mostly the time that they're documented breaching, is when they're in these large aggregations. So it could very much be deemed that might be pre-courtship behaviour, with sharks saying like, hello, I'm here, to other sharks.
Hello!
And that could prelude courtship. Again, we just said we don't really know what happens after that as they go into deeper depths, so it could definitely be something to do with that. One of the other theories was that it could be to do with parasite removal. So we get what's called lampreys attached to basking sharks. If you've not seen them, they're these really hideous alien-looking creatures.
Google them. They look like they're from a horror film. If you hadn't seen them,
they're pretty creepy. But we do see them attached to the basking sharks sometimes. One of the reasons that might be maybe not a lead-in theory is that we don't think that's too detrimental to the shark, and breaching is obviously very energetically costly when you're just feeding on plankton, so it might be that there's a more social reason for that.
It is pretty spectacular to see it as well.
Definitely.
There is that like crazy footage this year. There was a lot of stuff kicking off in Ireland this year, and go and look the video. I'll link it in the show notes. But it's crazy. Like there's lots of basking sharks just kind of aggregated together. They're not feeding, and there's a couple of divers like in the water with them, and then one of them just comes from like the depths, and it's swimming really fast, which is quite odd to see a basking shark do. And it breaches right in front of the divers, and although it's spectacular to see that, you do sort of like
be pretty nerve-wracking.
Because that's like a 4 to 5 ton shark that's launching itself out of the water. But it's so weird to see, and like Shane, you mentioned that the recent studies that were done by the University of Exeter, where they attached animal towed cameras, I think they're called, to basking sharks. So the cameras kind of aren't right on the shark; it's like following behind. And they've got some incredible footage, like you said, not exactly the mating itself, but a lot of the behaviour that might lead up to mating. So like,
amazing that. There's been some other stuff as well. I'm not sure if you've seen it. I think it's due to come out soon about this circling behaviour, and they're calling it the torus, where we've got basically when we've got a lot of sharks, similar to that maybe footage you just talked about, where they're non-feeding and they get into this circling behaviour where they're all tightly swimming around, and then they spiral off into the depths, and they think that's a kind of pre-courtship, pre-mating type thing, and probably links into that footage. So it's funny, it's like a jigsaw. You've got all these researchers doing different things, and it all kind of pieces together. But the tag that you mentioned from Exeter then picked up this group behaviour underwater where there was, I can't remember, there's probably 4 or 5 sharks on the footage, and normally you don't see them as close as that. They'll follow each other behind each other or to the side, but they were very, very close, which you would never really see them do from what we'd seen, and almost touching their fins and together.
I mean, I don't know about you, Rachel, but like I've definitely seen or I've been in the water with sharks and they look like they're just going round you in circles, and they're not.
Sharknado.
Feeding. Sharknado, yeah. And, you know, my favourite thing to come out of that research was that we believe that sharks touch fins before they mate, which is quite sweet.
Yeah, we've got
Holding
that
fins.
human habit of humanising other animals. Yeah. So romantic.
I think it's because shark mating in general is just so violent and brutal. It's quite nice to think that
they're holding fins.
Yeah. Something
it's really cute.
Sweeten up a little bit. But the next couple of questions are about threats to basking sharks, because there are quite a few. But you know, before we kind of talk about the obvious threats, the Outdoor Alex on Instagram wanted to know, does anything predate on basking sharks? Which is, again, a really good question.
Not known. The only thing that's possibly proposed was orca, because in South Africa recent years, there's been the ones that were harassing the white sharks, turning them over to go into tonic immobility and then eating their liver out. So basking sharks are obviously, as we said, got a big energy store there. So, you know, potentially a good food source for orca. We do have orca on the west coast, but there hasn't been, to my knowledge, any records of them attacking sharks or eating them of what's been seen. Although I did read yesterday that maybe further south in the UK there was a record of a fisherman maybe 50 or 60 years ago seeing that, which I hadn't heard before. Yeah, but it wasn't really an area where there was really orca hanging about anyway. And as probably a lot of people know, a lot of the orcas all have different feeding strategies and different teeth and calls and shapes, depending on what their prey items are. But I don't think there's any specific shark feeders like the fish eaters or the seal eaters or that kind of thing, because these two, in what they call them port and starboard, because they've got the floppy fins on either side. I think they were known as a specific shark feeding ecotype of orca. It's just they'd learned that maybe from their other food source being depleted or changing kind of thing. So it's quite interesting. But yeah, otherwise there's not really any other species. I mean, I doubt a white shark would go towards them. It's not really their type of food. So it would really only be orca. So and very little known or recorded about that.
I mean, I'm to be honest, I'm quite surprised there aren't any records of that, because basking shark would be quite an easy meal for an orca. And they've got that huge liver.
Certainly these days, there aren't apart from us.
Yeah, that brings us on very nicely to like some of the threats to basking sharks. Boom, nice segue. So humans are probably the biggest threat to basking sharks. And we used to be, especially in these waters, we used to be a much bigger threat to them. So can we talk, Rachel, do you want to talk a little bit about what they were traditionally fished for?
Yeah, so there's been commercial basking shark fisheries for hundreds of years, back to pretty much the 1700s when they were first discovered. So here in Scotland, Ireland and Norway especially have had quite a history of fishing basking sharks, and that's mostly for this big liver that we've kept talking about. So the liver can comprise almost a quarter of the body weight, and it's full of a really valuable oil called squalene. So that's still used today in quite a lot of stuff, but at the time it would be used for really day-to-day things like burning oil for lamps to light the streets. So yeah, they were fished in really large numbers, and here in Scotland and in the UK we think there was maybe over 100,000 sharks fished from the mid-1940s up until when the fisheries closed in 95, I think was the last.
Yeah, that's really recent.
Yeah, it is, like within our lifetimes they were still being fished, so it's quite a strange thing that we're now out here swimming with them so peacefully. Where they
should be thankful we're actually still swimming with them, given that amount of sharks we're taking out of that population.
Well, I think they're just recovering, right? The population that we're seeing.
Well, some of the accounts from like hundreds of years ago saying they were like stepping stones across the ocean. You can only imagine how amazing it would have been to have been there at that time and just seen them. But they were considered a pest even in some places because there were just so many of them.
It's just absolutely mad to think about, because I mean obviously we would kill for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Imagine being able to see like so many basking sharks that you could contemplate walking over the backs of them.
These sharks in the way.
There's other human-induced changes that are quite different to the ones we've already discussed. One quite big one, but again one that there's a big question mark over, is actually microplastics. So can we talk a little bit about that? So I know we've done some plankton sampling, but there isn't actually that much scientific data on microplastics.
No, there's been very little done on it, interestingly, even though it's been a really hot topic recently of microplastics. But as we've talked about, basking sharks feed in these areas of tidal fronts, which is where all the plankton is gathered from the tidal currents, but that's also areas where flotsam and jetsam and plastics all congregate as well. So obviously then you put two and two together and you see the basking sharks feeding in the area where there's lots of plastics, and they're filtering it out. So that could be a risk that they're ingesting this plastic, and it creates either toxicity problems or blockages in their stomach, because they've got quite obviously small organs from that point of view, because they just eat tiny little things. So we certainly have done some plankton sampling in areas where the sharks have been feeding, where there is plastics, just to try and get some ideas of numbers and what was in the actual water column, but obviously at a very basic level. The soundbite or whatever, I think what we figured out, because obviously we know how much water a shark can filter, and how much they eat per day, and we know how much water we filtered and how much plastics was contained within that slick. And then the basic calculation is, if the shark was feeding at the normal estimated rate that's been studied in that concentration of plastic in that area, it would be 440 grams of plastic per hour is what we thought.
Wow.
Basically correlating the two things. So there is a high risk to that, because the areas that they feed in coastal areas is affected by runoff and all the plastics that are in these areas. And certainly I think it's an area that could be well studied more than what it is, because there's very little going on from what I understand.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we definitely need more scientific data on it to know what the impacts on basking sharks are. And we can kind of gather from other filter feeders. I mean, there are other studies going on about other filter feeders, like the big whales, and it looks like they are taking it on board.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes sense. But one thing that we do know a little bit about is how we can do our bit to keep plastics out of the environment. So Rachel, say someone's listening at home and they're kind of a bit worried about plastics. What can they do?
So just really small changes that you can make while you're shopping, just being a bit more mindful about your waste you're creating. So over the past few years especially, there's just so many alternatives now to really simple swaps that you can make in your day-to-day life, like just not buying plastic water bottles, having your own, having a refillable cup when you go out for a coffee. And it's all these little changes that you make. But if you think collectively, there's a population of billions of people. If we all just make small changes, that's a huge amount of plastic we're already not contributing to the environment. Reuse like bamboo toothbrushes, shampoo bars. There's so many things that you can do now, and they're really great products as well. It's not like a lesser alternative. There's loads of really cool companies coming up with really great environmentally friendly products, which is awesome, and definitely the direction we need to be moving in when you've got plastic pretty much everywhere in the world, from Arctic ice to the deep sea to newborn babies before they're even born. It's been found in. It's pretty terrifying.
It's quite scary, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plankton, not plastic.
Hashtag.
But yeah, there's so much that you can do, and the same thing with our last threat that we're going to talk about, which is incredibly topical, because as we are talking or filming this episode, COP26 is actually going on in Glasgow right now, talking about where world leaders have come together to talk about the climate crisis and how to solve it. And we had quite a few questions about how climate change is going to affect basking sharks, and we have an episode actually in a couple of weeks' time, which is going to talk about the effects of climate change on sharks more broadly. But as we're talking about basking sharks, I thought it would be a good idea to sort of just mention this briefly as kind of maybe how they're going to be affected by it. So who wants to take this very meaty question?
Meaty. Yeah, just both of us, I guess, start off. Well, it's quite interesting because, like everything to do with basking sharks, you always need to know what's going on with their food. And the main way, I guess, they're going to get affected is their prey items. And the presence or absence or the location of where they are is very determined on oceanographic things like water temperature, seasons, and depth in the water column, all these different things, meteorological conditions. So the one I think we mentioned earlier is the two types of copepod, one that they prefer, which is more of a northern cold water species, and the other one which is more of a warm water one. We've seen this warm water species gone further north as we've got increasing water temperatures, so we may see that because the favoured type of food of the basking sharks has moved north, maybe their migration is going to move north as well. But one thing interestingly about that with basking sharks is they do this migration from the subtropics, almost up pretty much towards the Arctic, really, because they go as far as Iceland and up, northern Norway. So they've actually got quite a huge range as it is. So I think from that point of view, they could be quite adaptable because they do move within quite different water temperatures in quite different areas. But I think their distribution, or maybe the locations that they go to, may change depending on where this plankton assemblage ends up with the water temperature and things changing. So I think that could be one thing.
It's just quite interesting to note that when we think about the basking sharks here in Scotland, and they are quite protected, then it's all quite unknown from then on where they are and where they're going and what would happen if that population was to move elsewhere. And there's just not really enough of an understanding of their life cycle to be able to answer that. We didn't, I think, mention before that the Sea of the Hebrides is the first marine protected area specifically for basking sharks, which was a really exciting, and hopefully we can see some sort of movement forward, especially with COP going on now, as to what that might actually mean going forward. And so
it's quite interesting that we've created an MPA in Scotland, but the actual main factor of them getting affected, as in climate change, is that MPA is not really going to do too much to do that. It's out of our hands.
Of the MPA.
Yeah.
We need to keep them here.
But yeah, so we had a couple of questions about the Sea of the Hebrides specifically, and these are kind of our last ones from social media. So Abigail F on Instagram, she asked, this is potentially quite a hard question because I assume the answer to this is going to be we don't quite know, but her question was,
so you say to everything.
I don't know. Do we think that the basking sharks will slowly move to island or move to cooler or more nutrient-rich waters? This year there was quite a lot of them in Ireland, or kind of more than we've sort of seen at that time of year before, and less in Coll. So I don't know if she's asking this question as a way of like, is that going to be a general trend, or if she means in response to climate change.
Yeah,
probably a bit of both. I mean, they are. It's been proven that the ones going past Ireland are the same ones that come to Scotland. That's just the migration path of they're going up. It's more that they either that the migration wasn't as strong and they didn't come up, or that the plankton was further down and we didn't see them as much. So I would say that they would, if we're talking about climate change and what we just said about the plankton and the favoured species moving north, I think you would see a more northerly shift of the sharks going further north, moving with the food rather than going south, because obviously it's a cold water species that they're after.
Yeah. I mean, that is another question from Veronica on Instagram, who we know. So she did come out with us this year.
Oh.
Yeah. And her question was actually, do we have any idea of why we didn't get as many sharks on call this year? Because we didn't really get that many sharks around the Hebrides, which was super unusual. And I know you have some theories about this. Like, we don't quite know this yet.
Don't know. Yeah, lots of theories. I mean, like one of the it's quite good because when you get these little quotes from people, there was a lobster fisherman on Tiree that and he'd been at the fishing for 35 years and he'd never seen a summer like it, those kind of things. So it's interesting when you get these little sound bites from people about an anomaly. And of course, we're just looking at it as a snapshot of one summer. If you looked at it in the context of a couple of 100 years, it probably wouldn't really be that unusual to have a strange year in all these times, but certainly a very strange summer. But when you start looking into some of the meteorological things that were going on, like it was the let me find the stat because it's very interesting. It was the driest summer, the driest period since 1862. The summer past. It was also one of the warmest and one of the least windiest as well. So we had some very, very specific weather conditions. And as we talked about, when we're finding basking sharks, it's all to do with the plankton. And if we have a change in the plankton and whether that comes from a change in water temperature, a change in salinity, a change in nutrients from upwelling from storms, there's probably been some effect on the plankton from those meteorological conditions that's changed something around those areas. And an easy way to see it was the water clarity that we had this year. And it is hard because if you're going there for a good time and enjoying things, if you were to go into the water and have 30 meter visibility, absolutely fantastic. Because as a snorkeling experience, to have that water clarity is absolutely brilliant, and warmer waters kind of thing. But unfortunately, that's not conducive to good plankton conditions, and therefore then having plankton eating species, which a basking shark is one of. So yeah, I think generally we've had poor plankton conditions this summer, apart from a few little times of when we've had the sharks come in these plankton blooms. But the other interesting part of it was when we did see some of the sharks, they were very low in the water or feeding underwater, and when we dived down we found that there was a surface layer which was very clear and very little life in it, but below that, a few meters down, there was a layer where there was very thick plankton and the sharks were feeding just under that. So it might be, again, like many other times, it's a bit of a misnomer to say, there's no sharks here, because, as we know from the tagging data and what we've talked about, is the sharks move up and down in the water column, and just because they're on the surface doesn't mean that they're not there. It's just highly annoying for us because we only need to be able to find them when they're on the surface. So if they're even 2 centimetres underneath the surface, you're not going to be able to see them. We need to see the fins on the surface, and the reason they're on the surface is feeding on plankton, and if that plankton is sitting deeper in the water, then that's going to be troublesome for us. So it's hard to know, because there could well be hundreds and thousands of sharks just cruising around underneath us and we didn't really know.
Definitely something weird going on, but yeah, another mystery in the in the world of basking sharks. But my final question is, again, one that I ask every single guest on the podcast, and it's probably my favourite question. If you could be any species of shark and ray in the world, what would you be and why?
Well, you need to answer it first, because you said no one ever asked you.
I need to answer it first. Well, it changes every hour, depending on how I'm feeling.
Oh.
But my go-to answer is the pocket shark, because who wouldn't want to have bioluminescent armpits?
It's pretty cool.
You've thought of that one before.
You've just been waiting for someone to ask.
Anyway, Shane, what would yours be?
Oh, you know, Rachel first, just in case she steals one of my ones again.
I don't think it'll be the same as yours.
Right, go on, Rachel.
I have thought long and hard about this, and I'm gonna have to say the whale shark, just because they just have the best outfits, don't they, really? They're just beautiful. They've got this great pattern, and I'd just love to cruise around somewhere like the Galapagos all day.
That'd be nice.
Pretty nice. Yeah, that's what I think.
That's a good answer. They're very, very beautiful and graceful, and they have seemingly quite a nice life, apart from a lot of tourists swimming alongside you.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be one in the Philippines, but I definitely want to be one in like the Galapagos.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Right, go on then, Shane. What's
Very
yours?
Well, here I've got my Collins Gem shark book, because you probably don't know I've got 2 kids, and this is the little book that we're going through at bedtime at the moment. So I did think, so there's 2 answers. One, I was going to say taupe, because I think taupe are really cool sharks, which are kind of like a mini blue shark that hang about here.
Yeah, they're cool.
And when I worked at the aquarium years ago, we had one there and we used to feed it, and it was just the epicest little shark, and you used to cut around, and you just got big kudos if you actually could feed it, because it was quite a temperamental kind of thing. And when it hunted around, it used to swim around in circles, and then its nose used to kind of light up when it was kind of hunting around. So they're epic little things. We do get them.
Its nose used to light up.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Like it didn't light up, but it kind of almost. It's kind of a greyish, bluey kind of shark. It's not as vibrant blue as a blue shark, but it's kind of like a grey colour. But then it's right on its snout. It almost not went transparent, but you could see it things happening in it. Like it was almost using that for hunting, and it turned really quickly. So it almost used that, like, you know, the ampullae and stuff. But it's an epic little thing. Just used to zoom about and do its own thing. But out of the Collins guide for my bedtime stories, there was a lot of sharks in here. It's quite a good little thing. So I was going to go for whiskery shark.
A whiskery
shark. He's got quite a big beard for summer, for winter time. It's a whiskery shark, but it's a stocky, humped back shark with flaps over the nostrils that look like barbels.
That sounds like you.
The body is grey and pale below, because they're not getting much sleep at the moment with those 2 keeping me up. The young and some adults have dark saddles, like the saddles under my eyes. The snout is short, rounded, or wedge-shaped. And it's an active predator living near the seafloor, so it's a bit of a bottom feeder. So I'm going to go for whiskery shark.
Okay.
So your spirit animal.
It is. And that's the whiskery shark here.
Sadly, that is the end of our deep dive into the mysterious world of the basking shark. But you can find Shane on @ShaneWasik and Rachel on @Rachel.underwater and @RachelBrooksArt. She is also a phenomenal artist specialising in marine life, so please go and check out her work. And you can also check out the work of Basking Shark Scotland by following @Basking Shark Scotland, or go to www.baskingsharkscotland.co.uk. If you like this episode, please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next one, and leave us a nice review on iTunes. This just helps more people to find us. And if you would like a question answered on the podcast, or you just want to say hi, please feel free to get in touch by emailing isla@saveourseas.com. A massive thank you to our amazing guests, Shane and Rachel, for all their basking shark wisdom, to David Knight, who provided the brilliant jingle you can hear right now, and to you at home for listening. Have a jawsome week, and I will see you next time.